ma vie, calme-toi aujourd'hui. Ça commence avec toi. If I had a hammer, I'd a hammer in the morning, I'd a hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd a hammer out danger, I'd a hammer out a warning, I'd a hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a bell, I'd a ring it in the morning, I'd a ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd a ring out danger, I'd a ring out a warning, I'd a ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out a warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, well, I got a hammer and I got a bell, I got a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, live as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. In Salt Lake, Joe, by God, says I, him standing by my bed. They framed you on a murder charge, says Joe, but I ain't dead. Says Joe, but I ain't dead. The copper bosses killed you, Joe. They shot you, Joe, says I. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe.
Yeah.
I didn't die.
Yes.
Says Joe, I didn't die.
I feel fine. Daddy feels fine. He feels fine. Put him in.
And smiling with his
I understand. I'm not seeing anyone. We're just separated. And I'm listening in the middle of Barbara's husband's memorial service, so that's why I'm a little distracted. But anyway, they're just doing they're just doing a photo right now. It doesn't start really until 10. So I'm just watching my Zoom to, see. Right. Yeah. No, we have everything. I know. I'm not going anywhere. I do. I am. Yeah.
I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield
Down by the riverside. I'm going down by the riverside.
Yeah,
Down by the riverside.
I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield
Down by the riverside.
I'm gonna study war no more.
War no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down my heavy load
Down by the riverside. I'm going down by the riverside.
Yes, I'm gonna lay down my heavy load.
Down by the riverside.
I'm gonna study one more. I ain't gonna study one more. Ain't gonna study one more. I ain't gonna study one no more. I ain't gonna study one more. Ain't gonna study one no more. I ain't gonna study one no more. I ain't gonna study one no more. 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 Yes, lay down cares and woes.
Down by the riverside.
Oh,
Down by the riverside.
yes.
The riverside.
I'm gonna lay down my heavy load.
Down by the riverside. Going to study.
No more.
There once was a Union maid, she never was afraid of goons and ginks and company thinks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the Union Hall when a meeting it was called, and when the Legion boys come around, she always stood her ground.
Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die.
This Union maid was wise to the tricks of company spies. She couldn't be fooled by a company stool. She'd always organize the guys. She'd always get her way. When she struck for better pay, she'd show her card to the National Guard, and this is what she'd say.
Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die.
You gals who want to be free, just take a tip from me. Get you a man who's a union man and join the ladies' auxiliary. Married life ain't hard when you got a union hard. A union man has a happy life when he's got a union wife.
Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Anywhere on the street. See,
Hang me, oh, hang me. I'll be dead and gone. Hang me, oh, hang me. I'll be dead and gone. Wouldn't mind the hanging, but the laying in the grave so long, poor boy. I've been all around this world. I've been all around Cape Girardeau, parts of Arkansas. All around Cape Girardeau, parts of Arkansas. Got so goddamn hungry, I could hide behind a straw. Poor boy, I've been all around this world. Went up on the mountain, there I made my stand. Went up on the mountain, there I made my stand. Rifle on my shoulder and a dagger in my hand. Poor boy, I've been all around this world. Hang me, oh, hang me, and I'll be dead and gone. Hang me, oh, hang me, and I'll be dead and gone. Wouldn't mind the hanging, but the laying in the grave so long, poor boy, I've been all around this world. Put the rope around my neck, hung me up so high. Put the rope around my neck, hung me up so high.
Good morning, everybody. I hate to break up the interactions folks are having, but I'd like to invite you to come join us for the formal part of our program. Ned would not be too happy with the timing here. As we all know, he was not a morning guy. In fact, I remember I met him on Park Avenue a few months before he died, and it was early in the morning, and I gave him a warm greeting and asked him about something. And he looked at me, he says, "Excuse me, who are you?" So morning was not the time to interact with Ned. So I explained to him that I was his collaborator for the last 25 years and his department chairman and friend and on all the student committees. And I don't think he believed that the person talking to him was actually Jim Canary. So welcome. We're going to move quickly along, and I want to invite Julie Kaplan to come up. And she's one of our department administrators and a good friend of Ned's and one of the co-organizers. She's going to speak to us briefly.
I have to do the midget size microphone. Thanks, Jim. Welcome, everybody. I am happy to report that so many years after Ned was the director of graduate studies, so many that many of you probably don't know he ever was, he is still having an impact on students even outside his own lab. A student recently told me that he just passed a milestone exam, and he took Ned's advice in preparing for it by going to the pub to have a think. Thanks, Gordy. Congrats. He passed, of course. Pub is good prep. So just a few logistical announcements. Apologies to the Zoom folks, but for people in the room, we are going to stay masked, except when you're at the mic. You can remove your mask, as I did. And we will have some refreshments later. And you can remove your mask as well at the end, or they are packaged neatly to go if you feel more comfortable taking them with you, because, well, pandemic or no pandemic, Ned made clear that we had to remember him with food, and food that he liked. He was very specific. And please, everybody, remember to sign the guest book. I know this is the kind of announcement that should happen later, but I just wanted to tell people now as well. And before I give up the mic, I'm supposed to be quick. I'm going to leave you with a very quick bad joke, because probably everybody here knows that next to science and food and the people he held dear, Ned loved nothing more than a bad joke. I apologize for this. What did Spartacus say when the lion ate his wife? Nothing. He was gladiator.
Next, we're very glad to have one of Ned's colleagues from chemistry faculty and also the president of NYU greet you. And in fact, Annie Hamilton is probably one of the only administrators that Ned actually liked. So Andy.
Jim, thank you very much. And I've actually had the nicest thing said to me for a long time this morning by Bobby Aurora, who said that, Andy, you do realize you were the only university administrator who Ned did not shout at. And I take that as a great honor indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this very special, this sad, but joyous celebration of the life of Ned Seeman and everything that he has contributed to the world of science, to the world of higher education. And I'm particularly pleased to be here as the president of NYU, because it gives me the chance to speak on behalf of the entire university and to recognize just what many things Ned Seeman did for NYU. And I especially want to emphasize and focus on his research. He pushed the envelope. He committed to research at the very highest levels of creativity, of productivity, and of impact. But I'm also pleased to be here as one of his colleagues in the Faculty of Arts and Science, because it gives me, again, an opportunity to recognize Ned's role as a teacher and as a mentor to hundreds of undergraduates, graduate students, and postdocs who owe him a very great debt of gratitude. But most of all, I'm pleased to be here this morning as a scientist, because Ned Seeman's work in DNA nanotechnology was truly path-breaking. We'll hear lots about it from other speakers this morning. It was path-breaking, it was discipline crossing, and it had an immense impact. It changed fields. Now, I've been Ned's colleague for just 6 years since I came to NYU at the beginning of 2016. But I've known Ned for years, decades before that. I followed his work closely. And in fact, I followed it most of that time in awe, with my mouth open, seeing the quite remarkable things that he was able to do. In my very primitive synthetic organic chemistry lab, I saw Ned do things with molecular self-assembly and recognition that were just awesome. He was the real deal. He will be missed by NYU, but most especially, he will be missed by science. Thank you.
We've asked a few people to share briefly 2 minutes stories about Ned, so as we celebrate his life. And we tried to choose people from different periods of Ned's life and career. And in fact, the order of speakers is a little bit different from what you have in the program. Just between COVID and ice storms and our own human failings, there are a few changes. And so in fact, the first speaker is not on the program, but he's a very special friend of Ned's, and Greg Petsko, who is a faculty member at Harvard Medical School, and very long time friend. Greg.
I'd give anything not to have to do this. Back when telephone answering machines were a brand new thing, I bought one of the earliest models and programmed my greeting into it. It went like this: if you're an obscene telephone caller, you're out of luck. Greg Petsko isn't at home. But don't worry, after the beep, you'll have 30 seconds to record your heavy breathing. I set it up, went out to do some shopping, came back home, and there was one message on the machine. I played it, and all there was 30 seconds of heavy breathing. So I called Ned back. I once described Ned Seeman as dressing like a homeless mountain man and having a beard that looked like a small mammal was eating his face. But I also said that he was the most creative individual that I ever knew. And I've spent my life mostly around brilliant people. And that the things he valued were the things that we all should value. And the things he despised were the things we all should despise. He was my friend for 47 years, and he made a great difference in my life. He introduced me to more different kinds of weird Chinese food than you would find in the back alleys of Hong Kong. And he taught me that you could sprinkle 4-letter words over your conversation as though they were condiments. You know, we live in a time when science is corporatized, and many scientists are careerists, and they seem, in terms of personality, to have been stamped out by a cookie cutter. But Ned Seeman not only looked the same for most of his life, he was the same. There's a tendency as we get older to make compromises with the ideals of our youth, to become less radical, more risk averse. As life deals us one frustration or disappointment after another. But for all the years I knew him, Ned Seeman stood out his own inexorable self. Without him, the world is going to be much less interesting and a lot less fun.
Next, we have Donald Lipsky, who will be speaking on behalf of Barbara and the family. Donald himself is an artist and highly appropriate to be talking to us today.
Well, hello. It's wonderful to see you all here. Ned would have loved this. As you've been told, I'm a sculptor, as was Ned. I always thought of him as using DNA strands like a child would use Tinker Toys. Ned truly loved art. Most of you know the story of Ned's epiphany when looking at M.C. Escher's woodcut and imagining the fish as sticky-ended nucleic acids. Escher said, "Science and art sometimes can touch one another like two pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, which is our human life." Ned discovered that he and I shared a methodology. He said to me, "You do the same thing I do. Number one, you invent a problem. Number two, you try and solve it." And he laughed. Escher also said this, which in some magic way really seems to be speaking about Ned. "He who wonders discovers that this in itself is wonderful." Barbara, my sister, and Ned first met each other at their 50th high school reunion. They never knew each other in high school, which isn't that surprising in a class of 500 kids. Plus, Ned left after his junior year of high school to go to the University of Chicago. But as Ned said, quoting Mark Twain, he didn't let college get in the way of his education. And 50 years later, Barbara and Ned finally found each other, and it deeply enriched both of their lives. And I know that Barbara's loving care and attention significantly extended Ned's life. Even when he could no longer speak, her very presence was clearly deeply comforting to Ned. Ned had so many devoted friends who were always there for him, even if it meant flying halfway around the world. Many of you are here today, and you have Barbara's heartfelt thanks and deep appreciation. I know that you join us in missing Ned like a member of your own family. A last Escher quote for the absurdist that was Ned: "Only those who attempt the absurd will achieve the impossible." Thank you.
Next, we have Ken Carlin, faculty member at Johns Hopkins, who was a close friend and comrade of Ned in pre-tenure days in Albania. Ken.
Thank you. I've been a friend of Ned's. I was a friend of Ned's for 44 years. We started together as assistant professors at SUNY at Albany. I was in chemistry. He was in biology. We got to know each other right away. And a third close friend over all these years has been John Zubietta, who couldn't be here today. I think he's on Zoom. also in chemistry, a couple of years ahead of me. So Ned and I, of course, Ned was a city person and didn't really like Albany too much. He complained a lot, of course, and made sure he had an all cement garden. But he did well. He and I interacted, especially in 1983 or so, for 2 years when we were going through tenure together. We had lunch every day for 2 years, every weekday, and just bitched and moaned about the administrators and about the, sorry, Andy, but Andy, we met 50 years ago, I think, and administrators and the tenure process, but we made it through. But Ned was known for his craziness and his 4-letter words, and I want to read something John Zubietta wrote to me to help describe things. Ned had a loathing for administrators and misused authority in general. You could depend on him to lambast the pretensions of anyone who considered themselves elite or having some moral authority. He did this in the most amusing and obscene manner possible. It was a lot of fun. In '83, I also invited him to my wedding, and he came, and he was wearing an off-color corduroy pants, a bright red maroon blazer, and white tennis shoes. And my new mother-in-law at the time was absolutely appalled. And sometime later, I told Ned this, and he said, "But I got brand new tennis shoes." So Ned moved, as you know, here in 1988, and we've seen each other occasionally since then and talked. He's just was a tremendous guy. And when I visited about 6 years ago, coming up here to the city, I asked, "So how's New York City?" And he said it's kind of gone to hell because now there's a Starbucks and a nail salon on every block. And that does seem to be true. And also you could add in there Sephora and as the store and so on. But I really wish I had come to visit him more often. It was really horrible when I heard the news and that I hadn't got up during his illness. But Ned was a brilliant, incredibly intelligent person. He was a great scientist. And most of all, he was a mensch.
Next, we have Professor Paul Chaikin from NYU Physics, who's a current collaborator.
That would be great. It's a real privilege to have had Ned as a friend, a colleague, and a collaborator. I first met Ned in 2001 when I was organizing a Gordon conference, and I decided instead of going with the topic and getting experts in these topics, I would invite the smartest, most original people that I could think of. And so I called up a friend of mine at Rockefeller, and he said, the person you want is Ned. So I invited Ned to the conference, and he came up, and I met him at the train station in London. And I was surprised when I got off the train because I didn't know that Santa Claus was a chemist. So Ned didn't want to go right up, so we went to a bar, and he started telling me that DNA was actually good for something. It wasn't just the secret of life. You could build things with it. And he carried on with this, and he talked about knots and cubes and stuff like that. And when he learned I was a physicist, he sort of blamed me for not having the techniques to show exactly what he had found because he was just approximating with an AFM. So after that meeting, I decided this is a guy I have to work with. And so we started collaborating. 3 years later, I came to NYU, and he was one of the reasons for it. And since then, we've had what's called the self-replication group, where we meet every other week in his office. His office, as you may have seen in some of the, well, it's not showing now, in some of the clips before, his office has stacks of everything from the past 40 or 50 years. And I kind of think of it as his brain, right? Because everything is sort of disorganized in different places. Nothing is ever thrown out, nothing is forgotten, but he knows where everything is, right? Which is sort of great. Okay, so Ned won the Franklin Medal a few years ago, and he invited me down to be a speaker at the symposium. And I noticed that the people at the Franklin Institute, all when Ned walked in, they sort of had a glimmer. They sort of had a smile on their face, and I wondered why. And I didn't know why until 2 months ago, when Beth Sharaga, who's in charge of the prizes, sent a note around about Ned's passing. And she doesn't say who this is from, but it says, and I think, however, we heard from I know who it is now from our first speaker, 2-minute speaker. She writes, "I will always remember Ned's case because it included what is perhaps the most endearing description I've ever seen in a support letter. In a statement, a good friend of Ned's wrote, 'Ned dresses and looks like the mountain man Grizzly Adams, or more precisely like Grizzly Adams on a bad hair day. His hair gives the impression that a small mammal is eating his face. His language can be on occasion, shall we say, colorful. Only my drill sergeant could use profanity more imaginatively. He is as honest as the day is long, wears his heart on his sleeves, and cares about what should be cared about. You may ask what any of that has to do with the science. I would answer, that is inseparable from a science. Someone more conventional in their appearance or more concerned about how they appear to others would probably have followed a trend rather than created one. Somebody less well-centered in terms of character might have been attempted to cut corners and achieve rapid success, but to overhype their work. Ned would never do either.'" So I think that's a great statement. And the only other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank Barbara, because knowing him over the past 20 years and working with Ned, there was a before Barbara and there was an after Barbara. And although he was always a unique character, right, he was much more pleasant, unique character after Barbara. And so thank you very much for taking care of him for us.
Yes, I apologize for the current collaborator, but you know, when Ned passed, he was fully funded and had 2 or 3 papers out for review. So the little statement on the front really is true. He was active all the way as long as humanly possible. And the next speaker is another collaborator with an ongoing grant, going without him now, but it's Natasha Janoska, who's a professor at University of South Florida.
My story is a bit personal. The DNA whisperer, that is how I saw him first. I heard his talk at the second DNA computing conference. And here I'm a math person trying to figure out the basics of the molecule. And he was showing cubes made of DNA. Blew my mind. And the whole idea of expanding in 3D and geometry with DNA was eye-opening. I really met him a couple of years afterwards in an art gallery at UPenn, the same type of conference. And it was a perfect setting to meet him because he loved art and he loved beer at the end of the day. So we had a really nice conversation and we picked up, and again, that was the decision. I have to collaborate with him. I took my first sabbatical in his lab. I wanted to make an asymmetric DNA shape out of DNA. And he said, well, you really have to make a model. to make sure that this can actually be made. So I went back and I picked up some toys that he told me to do. And I built up this huge model. It took almost the whole of his office when I brought it in. And he got stocks, hanged the whole model around, walked around, thought a little bit, thinking, and then he said, it hates itself. It's not gonna make it. Add a hairpin here, and a hairpin here, and a hairpin here, and make another model and come back. So I went, made another model. It was even larger. I was freaking through the subway ride, whether somebody will step on it or kick it or something will happen to it. Same story in his lab, stalks, hanging model, and he walks around and he says, that will do. And it did it. And that was our first project together. And that was 2001. And September 2001, 9/11 happened. We spent through the tough days of New York together. We started hanging out outside the lab, drinks, dinners, conversations about art, music, books, food, and politics, lots of politics. He always had things to say about it. It turned out that we were on the same page. So lots of food, and he really loved good restaurants and travel, and not fancy restaurants, good restaurants, back alley restaurants. And we all knew when he was done eating, he would start sneezing. We had joint projects since for 20 years, good friendship, collaboration. The science was his life, and he was an inspiration to me. And he lived through his students and his work. And I am very privileged to have had a really tiny part in this with him. I miss him tremendously.
Next, we have one of the lab members, actually, you can say current lab members, and clinical professor on our faculty here at NYU, Yoel Ohayon.
Good morning, everyone. Symbolic today that we all gathered in the Just Memorial, which is directly across from the G. Castle building, when Ned used to teach his great courses in DNA nanotechnology and macromolecular chemistry. Little did I know that Ned's passion would one day be my own. I first heard of Ned when I was an undergrad researcher in Jim's lab. My bench neighbor, Osvaldo, would refer to Ned as the guy upstairs. It would be an understatement to say that Ned changed my life. But I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Jim, who recommended me for a summer job as a lab tech. So thank you, Jim, for putting me on Ned's path, which was an awesome one, to say the least. What was to be just a part-time summer job ended up lasting 21 years, 6 months, and 5 days. Ned would call it 2 turns of DNA. And over two decades, Ned was my mentor, Ned was my colleague, and more importantly, Ned was my friend. We might be closing a chapter today but we're certainly opening a new one as we carry forward Ned's legacy and vision. Ned wanted to be remembered as the founder of DNA nanotechnology. And throughout his life, he believed in 4 things: social justice, human equality, world peace, and scientific progress. Having no talents to promote the first 3, he said, he concentrated on the last. And we should do the same in his memory. Thank you.
And next, another current lab member, and Barbara says Ned's favorite person, Ruji Shah, who's a research scientist and the lab director of the Seeman Lab.
First, thank you, Barbara and Jim, giving me the opportunity to talk about Ned today. But I really don't know what to talk about, and I even don't know I'm ready to talk about or not. And because I truly believe someday I go to lab, Ned will be still in his right chair, in his office. That's 28 years I've working with Ned. And after the training work, talk about the behind nanotechnology, and always come back, all us with other brilliant ideas. And I saw on the program, Ned famous code when in one interview, and he always told me other words of it. He always said, in this world, one promise I can keep, I'm sure I can keep it. I will work until I die. And not surprisingly, he did just that. And but anybody here knows Ned have a certain routine or habit in his all adult life. And for continue working and keep himself healthy enough to come to the lab daily, he almost changed or abandoned them greatly. So anybody knows Ned, that's so hard for Ned doing this, and what sacrifice for him doing this continuing work. And I believe in the heaven, he can be his true self again. And that be the good son as I want to be, and the nice person as he always is, without the hard sell, against the friendly world sometimes. And also, I want him can do the most the creative science there without the restriction of the physical condition, and also of course funding. And Ned, thank you for not only taught us green science, but also more importantly, teach us how to be a better person. And thank you, Ned. Rest in peace.
Okay, next we're going to shift and allow some folks to share by Zoom. And I'm going to go in the back while that happens. And just a reminder, please try to keep the comments to 2 minutes. We're running behind now, and we want to allow some time for the open mic. But the first speaker will be Bob Guinness, who's been a close friend of Ned since college days, and he's now a professor at University of Illinois.
Well, first I'd like to say what a privilege it was to know Ned. And I've known him for over 55, 56 years. He was a great friend, and more than that, he was part of my family. Now I'll share some slides I'll be the guinea pig for some of this technology here. Can you see? Who knows? Anyway, I've known Ned since college. This is his class of 1966, University of Chicago picture. He did not like the University of Chicago, and he once told me he would send them the contributions that he made sure were less than the postage it would cost them to process it, and thank him. Second to Albany, I think, or Albania. Since the 70s, he'd been coming to family celebrations at my parents' home and other places we gathered until just a couple of years ago. My parents, my brothers, my sister, my kids all consider him part of the family. He's like a brother. This is him in 1986, so 20 years since college. You'll see the colored pens. Here's another picture, one of the few you'll see with Ned with kids. This is my oldest child, Emmeline, who is attending by Zoom now. This is the occasion where he told me that when I had a kid or kids, that would be the end of my career. I think that was from his training and experience at Albania. It wasn't, I'm glad to say. But he did say, I did come back to him and said, well, your boss, Alex Rich, previous boss, has kids and he had a great career. And Ned said, yeah, but he didn't pay any attention to them. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it was a great comeback. Ned had a great way of, a great turn of phrase. He once drove up to our house sometime in the 80s in one of his old cars. You could see the road through the floor, the front seat. It was rusted through. And it was, the muffler was non-existent. I went out there and said, what a racket they're making. And he said, that's an acoustic tachometer. It's great, great guy. This is another picture from a family event. He's giving me sex advice here. This is from my mother's 100th birthday. You'll see Ned up there with the rest of my family. This is Ned in one of his great ties, and Barbara. And I do want to thank Barbara so much for all the work that she's done for Ned in his sick days. This is my daughter's wedding, Sadie's wedding, and she's there in the church now. By the way, Jim, you said Ned wasn't a morning person. You forgot to say he also wasn't much of a church person either. So one other comment I want to make. It said that Ned never cooked. That's sort of true, but not entirely true. When he was in Cambridge in his apartment, and we overlapped both in New York and in Cambridge, living there, he never bothered turning the gas onto his stove. On the other hand, when he wanted to have some meat at home, he would buy it in little plastic pouches and turn the hot water on in the sink. So that's a form of cooking. So I'll say he did cook. All I want to say now is rest in peace, brother. You've had a life that's fantastic. You've contributed incredibly to science, and what a brilliant, wonderful person. A huge hole now in my life and in the lives of many others. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. By the way, your people are able to share their screen, but you have to manually share from your end. The capability has been turned on, so I'm sorry about that, Bob, that you couldn't. But Bob Grease is our next speaker, who also is a friend since college days, and he's currently a professor at University of Michigan.
Right, she's horrible.
Hi, can everyone see this? Picture of Ned?
Yes.
Yes, good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of other pictures. Ned and I met in summer of 1965, a long time ago, And I'm a mathematician, so I'm out of this circle of lab scientist types that are present today. Ned came and then immediately started the flood of jokes, complaints about politics, smoking Galois cigarettes in those days, and more jokes. Over the decades, we kept in touch with each other. We visited each other every couple of years in a whole variety of cities. And I noticed that in several of these locations, there was, speaking of cooking, frozen Uno's pizza, which he would pick up when he visited his mother in Chicago, and he would return with an Uno's pizza in a kitchen that didn't have any gas, but so he managed. The first story I want to tell is a school break from winter 1966, and let me pick the photo that I want. Here it is. And I call this For Future Professors. On the left is a very tall and thin Ned Seeman. And to the right of him is Bob Guinness, and there's myself, Bob Grice. My name is pronounced Grice, but most people can't guess that. And finally, Jack Tossell. Jack Tossell and Bob and I shared the apartment that I mentioned, and Jack passed away in 2016, unfortunately. This was on a trip. They're picking me up in Pittsburgh, and it was on a road trip driving from Chicago to the east. And during this road trip, Ned was driving and smoking Galois, and he was singing this famous Lee Dorsey song called Ya Ya. Yes, he was really singing it. That was really something. I have other. I'm sensitive to the time, so let me jump around here a little bit. I visited him at the University of Pittsburgh during his period there. That was Pittsburgh's my hometown, and we had dinner one night at his place watching horror movies. And Ned said, "I'll cook dinner for you," and it turned out to be macaroni and cheese made on a hot plate. He knocked over a bottle of beer, and because he didn't want to get out of bed where he was lying watching, he grabbed a nearby piece of underwear and wiped up the beer and threw it in a pile of laundry. Anyway, he was a great guy, really a pleasure to be his friend. And I finally mentioned the time 1990 on his balcony, where I met his cat, Spacey, who was his main companion in that era. And we were both, it was 1990, and suddenly he declared in the middle of a conversation about something else, "It's half over." Well, we were both about 45 years old, so I guess I got the meaning for that. Very dramatic, and he didn't discuss the finality of life in any great detail, but well, I hate to stop, but I want to respect the two-minute limit. It was terrific knowing Ned. He is a huge spirit, and he really enjoyed his life. Ya ya. Thank you.
Next, we have Tom Ketzel, who is another longtime friend and also from crystallography circles. Tom.
Yes, thank you. My wife Carol and I, and indeed our entire family, feel that we've been so privileged to know Ned, and have lost a great friend. In spite of Ned's predilection for paved yards that you heard about before from Ken, he did come down quite frequently, visited us at our rather conventional looking suburban home on Long Island, was part of many of our family celebrations, really a member of our family. And I think often the people outside science that I know maybe only really believe that I'm a scientist because of my friendship with Ned. when we were trying to figure out what to say today, Carol suggested I tell you one of our favorite stories about Ned. Ned and I met in 1972 in Japan, where we were attending an International Crystallography Congress. And after the Congress, we embarked on a trip around Japan. And Ned was always interested in exploring. And so we stayed at Japanese inns. And of course, there wasn't much English in many places in Japan back then, 50 years ago. And so we had some amusing situations. One was in Hiroshima. We were staying in a small hotel, and it turned out the Japanese bath in this hotel was co-ed. And I certainly was not sure what to do and probably a little embarrassed. And apparently Ned and I caused a great deal of amusement amongst the staff there, because the next day when we were leaving the hotel, they were lined up to say goodbye, very polite, but I noticed that many of them, most of the young ladies, were certainly laughing and giggling behind their hands. So it was a very funny situation for us, but I think it sort of exemplifies how Ned was always looking to explore, never lost, as we've already heard, never lost his sense of almost childlike wonder and looking at the world in a new way, and bringing a new perspective to bear on whatever problem you might be thinking about. And I think possibly this was one of the things that made Ned unique as a really great, extraordinary scientist. Now, Ned liked to tell a story about how thrilled he was when he was back in Chicago as an undergraduate, when he had the realization that he could actually get paid as a university scientist to play in the lab and do what he really wanted to do. Now, he never lost his fine Chicago accent, as we all know. Even after spending more than 10 years in, as we've heard, what he referred to as Albania, and almost 35 during his extraordinary career at NYU. The last months were extraordinarily tough for Ned. And it was so hard for many of us to see him confined to his hospital bed. And I just want to say a word to Barbara. Barbara, you have been so faithful, constantly by his bedside, always there to hold the phone whenever we call. We'll just never forget your devotion. Now, mindful of the time, I just want to sum up with a quote that I have from a mutual friend, George DeTitta, the former CEO of the Halpin Woodward Institute in Buffalo. When the word of Ned's passing spread and reached us, George sent me the following text, and I quote, Tom, word of Ned's passing reached me this morning. What a mountain lion he was. And I think George has really summed it up there. So Ned, we'll always miss you, dear friend. Thank you.
Next, we have Shuguang Zhang, who is a director in the MIT Media Lab and a colleague from MIT days.
First of all, make a correction. I'm not a director of Media Lab. I'm a friend to Ned. Francis Crick made a remark. One could not be dedicated to anything unless one believes in it passionately. That describes Ned perfectly. Ned opened a new field, being nanotechnology. Started from theoretical paper 1982. And that was unheard of. In those days, people were not interested in DNA beyond the DNA as a genetic material. He thought DNA as a material science. And he truly dedicates his life in last 3 decades after moved to NYU and completely transformed the world. and has a tremendous impact for nanotechnology. Rightly so, he won the Cavalli Prize from Norway as nanotechnology. He also, doing this DNA nanotechnology, invented the art, the molecular art. That's why we have heard that next art and science. That brought me to another slide I would like to show you. Is Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo said, study the science of art and the art of science. And Ned did both. I first met Ned in 1983 as a graduate student visiting from UC Santa Barbara at a meeting, the Albany meeting, famous Albany meeting. At the time, lots of crystallographies and biophysicists came to the meeting, very unusual. And Dorothy Hodgkin, a Nobel laureate from UK, came, and several future Nobel laureates, Tom Stites, Martin Kaplas, and many more came to the Albany meeting, even though it's called Albania, but all the big scientists came. And then Ned loved parties, as I've heard, the beer and friends. And during Albany meetings, we cramped into his small room, almost hundreds of us, and could only stand in. There no place to sit. And lots of beers and wine flowing for many hours. And that was my first meeting in scientific meeting. I was totally shocked to see scientists drinking so much beer at such a gathering. And Ned published the original paper in 1982, nucleic acids junctions analysis, because he knew DNA so well. And I believe Ned is the only person who could come up with DNA nanotechnology, because the deep understanding and insight into all kinds of possibility of DNA base pairings, nobody could have done it except Ned. And because his imagination in science and his interest in art. So that combination to put Ned as the central figure for DNA nanotechnology. Professor Martin Egley will elaborate on this further. And as we all heard, Ned did not like Albania. And as soon as he left Albania, or NYU Albany, moved to NYU, he flourished. And his publication and then matched what he did at MIT. It's everything's original. And his origami inspired hundreds of people, including people at Caltech, at Eric Winfrey and others, and people at Harvard Medical School. We still use those Ned's the teaching course. Every year we meet Ned. So as we also heard, Ned does not believe much in religion and didn't care about religion. And also didn't care about the soul. But the ancient Greek discussed the soul. However, if there was soul, I believe it is a personal unique identity that is being continuously remembered and celebrated for years to come, as Archimedes, Socrates, Pythagoras, Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Isaac Newton, Wolfgang Mozart, and Ludwig Beethoven, Albert Einstein, Francis Crick, Alexander Rich, and Ned Seeman. So for that, thank you for inviting me to give the memory of Ned.
Next, we have Martin Egley, who was just mentioned, who's a faculty member at Vanderbilt.
Hi, I'm Martin Egley. As said, at Vanderbilt in Nashville, I met Ned on many occasions, first in the late 80s at the conference, and I right away discovered many parallels in terms of training and interests with Ned. He was a chemistry student, a trained X-ray crystallographer. He had a love of symmetry, and the deep interest in nucleic acids. And then both of us postdoced in Alex Rich's lab, Ned in the mid-70s, and I did that 15 years later. Now, Ned's pioneering work made an early impression on me right away. For example, the crystal structures of nucleic acid mini duplexes. Ned had at that time obtained an atomic resolution image of DNA, not the model by Watson-Crick or snapshots by fiber diffraction, but an actual duplex with a defined helical rise, stacking, a precise measurement of the twist between the bases, metal lines, the water structure around it. What a feat. And then came the next leap. Ned's study on the sequence-specific recognition of the double helix nucleic acids by proteins in 1976, years before the advent of the first experimental structure of an actual complex. A quote attributed to Albert Einstein immediately comes to mind: imagination is more important than knowledge. So Ned predicted one interaction in particular between the amino acid arginine and the nucleobase guanine that has literally been observed in every experimental structure of a protein DNA complex determined to date. Both pioneering and incredibly imaginative. It reminds me of a statement in a recent issue of the Atlantic magazine on artificial intelligence. While the way to wisdom leads through knowledge, there is no path to wisdom from information. Well, that's not true in Ned's case. He jumped directly from very little information to wisdom. So it's not surprising that Ned saw a different application of DNA when he founded the field of DNA nanotechnology at the time when most everybody else was busy talking about sequencing and later genomics and RNA structure and function. So it's yet another example of Ned's boundless imagination, creativity, and curiosity. So Ned is now gone and we shall never see him again. But his achievements and ideas will shine very brightly in the future. So thank you, Ned, and thank you all for being here.
Next, we have Yunghui Chen from, he's a professor at University of Delaware and was Ned's first PhD student and made the cube. Yunghui.
Can anybody see me? So I want to share with some sort of Ned Seeman's Albany Day first, right? So because a lot of people have not shared with Ned in Albany. See the picture here, right? When in Albany, we have two graduate students. So I was the only one stay with Ned in Albany, like the previous Dr. Sen talking about in Albany days. So I also remember Ned Seeman's famous Albany party, right? That's very hard to describe. You cannot imagine a small apartment have like more than 300 people packed into his apartment. That's Ned Seeman's Albany party, famous Albany party. So I was there 2 years with Ned. Then in 88, he moved to NYU with two students, me and John Mueller. So we are the only two students moving with Ned to NYU in, I think it's 1988. So then after that we can, so when he, in the early days of NYU, between about 1990 to 2000, right? Ned recruit a lot of more talent students like Chandler Mao, Hao Yan, and Roger Schatz that joined the lab. And also he collaborated with a lot of different field of scientists, like computer scientists, mathematicians, engineers. So that's a heyday of the beginning day of Ned in NYU. So we have all the very sort of interesting science going on in Ned's lab. So then I think that looking back, like, so his career really culminated when he received the Cavity Prize in 2010, and then Ben Franklin Medal in Chemistry in 2016. So this picture showing that the guests invited in the Cavity Prize Awards ceremony in 2010. So these are the foremost students and professor and collaborator are all here. These are the 10 people got invited to that ceremony in 2010. So then, and this is a picture of the Norwegian king when he gave the awards to Ned here, one of the receiver in nanotechnology. Okay, and then these are more picture of that day in Norway, right? These are Chandler Mao, Hao Yan, and these are the colleague, and Doji Shah, and Neville Kallenbach, and Jim Canary. Yeah, so this is more picture on that day. And then I want to share you the some more picture I found. Right, just this is in 25. Me and Ned, we went to Japan together to a conference. So knowing that, you know that he cannot live without Chinese food. So we went to Yokohama, Chinatown, to looking for Chinese food. These are the two pictures in Yokohama's Chinatown. And this is in the park in Tokyo somewhere. So I just want to share this few sort of picture I discovered with you to remember the old day of the Neds, right? The Albany days and the NYU days, early days. All right. So we all miss him. So we will celebrate his character. So because there are many people already mentioned this, I don't want to repeat it anymore. But then we will miss him forever, Ned Seeman. All right.
Okay, we have a couple additions. Hao Yan, professor at Arizona State, who wanted to be here but couldn't. Hao?
Thank you, Jim. Ned has been a great mentor, friend, and inspiration for so many of us. There have been so many things I've learned from Ned. The most two important things are being persistent and being supportive. He is extremely passionate about his science and never gives up. He once said, if something doesn't work, use a hammer. If it still doesn't work, use a bigger hammer. And also he's always supportive of his students and junior colleagues in the field. I have been serving on faculty search committees in my department these days and have had the chance to read some of Ned's recommendation letters for his students, which often are over 5 pages long. I know he even pre-writes all of his students' recommendation letters to make sure students will get letters when it is needed. And I nowadays try to do the same to support my own students and postdocs. 5 years ago, Ned was sent to ICU in China due to a strange lung infection on his trip in Asia. I emailed him and asked what I could do to help. He responded in capital letters, "Get me out of jail." And Roger and we flew over to China immediately to help him out, but we failed to get him out of the hospital because the doctors wouldn't agree. But I witnessed how vulnerable a big giant could be and how desperate Ned was when he was isolated from his work, just like fish out of water. Over the years, Ned and I have developed from mentor-student relationship into more of a close personal friendship. I regard him as a father figure. In the past year, he has been sick and hospitalized for quite some time. Each time when I called Barbara, I was always so worried that there would be bad news. In the last few years, I went through some downtime in my personal life. And last time when I got engaged and married again, I was so excited to call him and share the good news. Ned was quite weak and already at the time, and said in a very low voice that, "I'm very happy to see you happy, Hall." I told him on the phone, I said, "I miss you, Ned." And Ned responded, "I miss you too." Sorry. Ned, I promise to take my wife to visit you soon. I promise to take you out to some authentic Chinese food next time when we both go to China. And from now on, I don't know whom to call when I achieve another milestone in my career and life. Ned, I really miss you now. I will always do. Thank you.
And now we have Eric Winfrey, professor at Caltech and collaborator and short-time lab visitor. Eric.
Yes, so thank you for letting me say a few words here. For those of you who are wondering about the background image here, it's a painting by Anna Urpino called The Brewery, which was inspired by Ned's blackboard in his office and the story of his invention of DNA nanotechnology in an Albany pub. I first met Ned when I was a graduate student at Caltech, and he's a big reason why I'm still at Caltech. I met him at Princeton, actually, when we both attended the first conference on DNA computing in 1995. At the time, I considered myself a mathematician and computer science scientist, and only a few months earlier, I had learned about Ned's work from my friend Paul Rodeman, who was more familiar with chemistry. As part of my talk at the conference, I discussed my embryonic ideas for how Ned's DNA nanotechnology could be used as the foundation for a way to compute by molecular self-assembly. And I was super surprised to discover that Ned was in the audience, and super excited that he invited me, Paul, and a few others to get a beer at the pub afterwards. And that's where he told me that my ideas were unlikely to work. Not with the molecules I was envisioning, at least. He also told me what he thought was the fix, a different flavor of DNA molecule called the double crossover that his group had recently invented and characterized. So he invited me to his lab over the summer, where he trained me as an experimental chemist. And a few years later, we had a paper in Nature. Ned's efforts to help young people become successful in science is a common story. We just heard about that from Hal. I guess I was another recipient of that generosity. He's someone who illustrates what it means to have a vision, to see things that others don't see, or don't see the value of, and to pursue it for decades in near isolation, because that's what it takes. And this is the other way that he helps young people, not just directly, but by example. It takes a strength of character and a belief in oneself that very few people have to pursue one's vision when others aren't seeing it yet. And so I learned from Ned what it means to bring something really new to science. It's to value things that others don't yet value, to care about things that others don't yet care about. And this is where you can contribute something truly unique, like Ned did, something better than just being able to run the race faster and be the first to a well-recognized goal. Of course, it also means that one doesn't have an easy job getting funding or being recognized. So I'm really glad that ultimately Ned has been recognized, not just by his friends and close colleagues, but by the broader scientific community as the visionary and genius that he truly is. He will be missed and remembered, and fragments of his soul will live on in all the science and scientists that he touched. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we have a recording from Chunhai Fan, a close collaborator of Ned at Shanghai Jiao Tong University.
Good morning, everyone. This is Chunhai. Our hearts are heavy today, but we come together and we remember Ned by celebrating his life and all of the love that he brought to our own lives. To me, Ned was a true friend and a great mentor. In particular, we communicated with each other very, very often. And pandemic started later in 2019. For almost a year, we wrote emails back and forth, sometimes on a daily basis. Besides the pandemic, the most things that we discussed were about American and Chinese cultures and food. I learned so much from him, as one would expect, as he is so knowledgeable man with so deep insights in life. The first thing that impressed me was his braveness to death. The last email that I received was on December 16th, 2020, when he wrote to me very simply, "Only friends. I can't travel or walk, Ned." A few days before that, he wrote, "I've been unable to walk for the past month or so. I'm doing a little better now. I've stopped reading my emails just because there's so much of it. I'm trying to do a little more today. I hope you are okay. At least it seems that we got rid of Trump. I'll be sure January 21. Those were the last words that I heard. The second thing that impressed me so much was his familiarity with the Chinese culture. He even read the English version of the most famous Chinese classical literature, A Dream in Red Mansions. That is a monumental work like Shakespeare's, known to every Chinese, but rarely read by people even in China. But he knew so many details of the masterpiece, and he had very important insights and comments. The third thing that is not surprising to most of you is that his great love to strange foods. Every time I mention some strange foods to him, like fermented tofu that has very strong flavor, he would say, "Ha, good, I will come to China to try it." He was indeed very easy to be invited if there was any chance to find strange foods. So, Ned, heaven is far away. May you have a safe journey and enjoy the food there.
Our final recording is from David Julius, who's a professor at UCSF and a Nobel Prize winner, was a new Ned from MIT days.
Hi, I'm David Julius. I first met Ned when I worked as an undergraduate research associate in Alex Rich's lab at MIT. I was on the late schedule because I'd come in after class in the late afternoon and work until the wee hours of the night, which definitely put me in Ned's time frame and allowed me to be part of Ned's orbit. And even though I was just an undergraduate, Ned was very friendly and sort of took me under his wing and taught me a lot about what it means to be a scientist and how to do science. But since Ned wanted us to focus on humor today, I'll tell one little vignette that I think kind of exemplifies in part what our relationship was like. And, Ned was, as many of you know, was an avid reader of the New York Times. And he always started his day by doing the New York Times crossword puzzle, which he could rip off in about 30 seconds. And one day when I was walking by his room, he said, "Hey, Julius, you're from Brooklyn. You have to hear about this story." And he read me a column in which some guy had been going around Brooklyn smashing car windshields. And it turns out the motivation for this was that his brother-in-law owned a car windshield replacement business. Well, as soon as he said that, without dropping a beat, Ned looked over the fold of the paper and said, "Gee, good thing his brother-in-law wasn't a proctologist." So I think that sums up Ned's wry sense of humor, his way of looking at things differently from everybody else, and the fun that we had together when he was in the lab. That and sharing Uno's pizzas that he would bring back from his trips to Chicago every now and then. Ned, I love you. I learned a lot from you. You are a unique individual and you lived life your own way. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
We're now going to open up the mic, and we're going to go a little bit past 12 noon since our prepared comments were not always exactly 2 minutes. And so please, if you'd like, we're going to start with the people who are here in person. We go for 15 minutes and then switch over to the Zoom call. So those of you who are here, please just come up here to the mic. Please keep it to 2 minutes. I'll be standing up at 2 minutes. And then I'll start chasing you as time goes on. So welcome.
Hi there. This will be quick because I will be speaking about the entirety of Ned's athletic career. So the graduate students in Albany had a weekly softball game in our very short summers. And there was a keg. But Ned initially wasn't invited to participate because it was felt that he was anti-athletics and it would be embarrassing to have him try to play softball. Finally, someone invited him, and I know who's up there listening, Kathy and others who might know the story. And Ned immediately gets assigned to the team that picks him to right field, get him out of the way so he won't get in trouble. First guy up, switches, hits the ball, deliberately hits it between first and second. Ned runs over, trots over, scoops the ball up with his gloved hand and throws it to second base ahead of the runner. He did exactly the right thing. Everyone's surprised. Next inning, Ned comes to bat, and outfield comes in. It's Ned. I mean, there's no way that Ned could hit a softball. And Ned gets up. He's a big guy, but this is a trained skill. And Ned, first pitch up, Ned swings and blasts the ball. Screeching line drive up the alley between center field and left field. Ned races to first base, rounds the bag, heads to second, looks out there, sees that the outfielders are coming to the ball, starts heading to third. The ball's coming to third, Ned's coming to third. Ned does something that no one in that league had ever done before. He slid feet first into third base. It's Albany. The ground was rock hard. Ned skids into third base. I don't even remember if he was safe or out, but he skids into third base. And when he gets up, he has a broken arm. And Ned comes off the field. And that is the sum total of Ned's athletic career. It lasted 1 inning. At the awards banquet, Ned got the Purple Heart, and he kept this award with him for many years after that. Did he still have it? I don't know. He had this award. He would post it in his house. And at the banquet, he was asked, "We didn't expect that you knew how to play baseball. I mean, how did you play? Why do you play baseball of all things?" And he said, as a kid, when you play baseball, everyone, no matter how good they are, everyone gets a turn at bat. And he said, and when you get to bat, you have this string of numbers that extends, that identifies you, hits, runs, walks, whatever. And for Ned, I think this said something about him, is that the important thing about it was that not playing the game, but that everyone had something, and numbers, a string of numbers was important. So it was the kind of thing that Ned valued about anything. Wasn't the money, wasn't anything like that. It was something intrinsic that you got out of something. And for Ned, it's always been numbers. Thank you. Tell them who I am. Stuart Fisher, Ned's, I was housemate of Ned back in Chicago in the 60s, early mid 60s. Knew him almost continuously for the last 55 years or so. And, you know, I can just say that in all the time that I've known Ned, his friends, some of his friends are here, and friends listening in. One thing I've never heard, other than administrators, Ned has never said a bad word about any of his colleagues or people that he works with, and certainly not about his students. He loved them all.
So my name's Phil Lukeman. I was a postdoc with Ned. I first met Ned in '98 when he interviewed me for a postdoc. Naturally, we had the interview at a restaurant and a bar with good food and good beer. Within the first hour of us talking, he referred to a very distinguished scientist as 6 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. But after we talked for a while, he lost his shyness and diplomacy and started telling me what he really thought about things. And I was kind of hooked. That's the thing about Ned. He always knew where you stood. I wouldn't say he had no ego, quite the contrary, but for him, science, fairness, and truth, or to use a more Ned-like expression, lack of bullshit, was always paramount. Every 2 weeks at 6 in the evening, his lab used to have multi-hour group meetings, and which would often extend into the night. We'd drink Tsingtao beer and eat Chinese snacks while Ned would sit there stuffing his face with a Chicago deep dish pizza, inevitably, oh, and a 6-pack of Diet Slice. Inevitably, he started hiccuping quite loudly, and he'd say, "Now I know I'm full. Hiccups mean the food is touching the vagus nerve." One at a time, each of the 15 to 20 students and postdocs would stand at a board in front of the group and present what they'd done for the last 2 or so weeks and showing data in mind-numbing detail. Ned would ask technical questions about all of it. He would keep in his mind 15+ projects simultaneously down to the last experimental detail without referring to any notes. So the reason I bring this up is this is a bit of a rite of passage for people, especially new students. Usually when someone screwed up, or as Ned would say, really fucked the chicken, some error in experimental design or execution would be noticed by Ned, who'd offer a suggestion to the student again and do it a different way, or do a different design, and the student would sheepishly say, "Okay," and sit down. One time over one of these errors, there was a back and forth between the student and Ned. "Did you try it my way?" Ned said. "But here's the data that I just showed you where I did it my way," says the student. "Listen, you get to do it your way once. Do it my way and you might learn something." There's a bit of tension in the room, right? Ned and the student and the boss are arguing. "I did it my way," said the student. He put another gel on the board. "And I did it your way twice." And he puts 2 more gels on the board and it still doesn't work. The room's silent. The data looks conclusive. Ned, in front of the whole group, novices and all, says, "Well, fuck me. Shows what I know. We'll have to do something else." And on the meeting went. And that's what I mean. Science, fairness, and truth. He didn't put up with bullshit. Whenever I greeted Ned with some version of "how's it going," he almost always responded, "Life sucks and then you die." Blunt as always. I can say one thing. Our life sucked a whole lot less because we got to spend time with him. Ned was a scientist and a visionary. He was a creative, loyal, big-hearted, left-wing, filthy-mouthed fucking genius. The world was a better place for having him in it. I'll miss him.
Good morning. I'm Nicole, and my coworker is here. I am happy to be a part of Ned's life, was a part of Ned's life, and his caregiver. Thanks to Barbara, I can just share one joke with you. I remember I used to get the Nepro. Barbara used to say, Nicole, feed him, feed him. When Barbara turned his back, he said, get that shit out my face. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bobby Aurora. I'm a faculty in the chemistry department. Ned hired me 20 years ago along with Jim and didn't fire me, so that's good. Ned and I and Neville started doing whiskey hours once a month when Ned would be in town. So most of the time, these hours were complaining about university administration and the department chair. But what I learned is that Ned's has three really favorite places that he would like to be. One is in his office. The second is a scientific conference. And the third, we've already heard about it, is a pub in Albany. So I really wanted to figure out how to get into this pub with Ned and figure out what he did there. And so one year I got myself invited to this Albany conversation. It happens every 2 years, and Ned and Neville set it up, and there are lots of very bad stories and bad things that happened at this conference. So I wanted to be part of this. So I asked Ned, Ned, how do I, it's a 5-day conference, how many days should I be there? And he said, unless you're a fucking idiot, you shouldn't be there more than 2 hours. So I woke up very early that morning. I drove to Albany, and my talk was around 2 p.m. So I got there around 11 o'clock, and I said, Ned, you have to take me to this pub that you're always talking about. So we went to this pub, we started talking about Escher and our authors. And I told him that, one of my favorite authors, Dostoevsky, said that a man's true nature can only be judged under extreme situation. So Ned had a twinkle in his eyes and he said, I'm going to figure this out for you. I'm going to get you really drunk and let's see how your talk goes. And so we sat there, we drank for a while, we stumbled back. And I said, Ned, you have to promise me one thing since you got me so drunk for this talk, you're going to ask an intelligent question at the end. So I got up there, I fumbled and tried to figure out how to give this talk. And I started saying, I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be here in Albany. And I want to dedicate this talk to Ned. And I look over, he's sitting in the first row and he's already totally asleep and zonking. So there was that. At the end, I asked him, Ned, what the hell happened there? You were supposed to ask me a question. And he said, well, you didn't have to be so damn boring. Anyway, so we miss Ned.
Hi, my name is Bill Sherman. I was a postdoc with Ned, and I'll try to run through a few different things I wanted to say in the brief time. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about some of his background as a personal life that he didn't really talk about a whole lot, but I had an interesting exchange with him when there was a student in the lab who was having a hard time. And Ned was, he always defended his students very strongly against outside threats, but sometimes inside the lab, as we've heard, he could be a bit, he could complain at times. And I felt he was giving a hard time to a kid. And I said, look, his parents passed away recently. And he's, I'm sure he's very upset about that. And Ned said, really, I wasn't upset. And he wasn't referring to the kid's parents, he was referring to his own parents. And I felt like that was a very poignant exchange because he obviously had a very difficult youth and he didn't talk about it much. He occasionally said things about so his father dying the day after he graduated or something like that. But it's amazing that he could be so caring about his students and such, coming from a difficult early life. And I didn't get much more view of it than that. But in any case, I wanted to actually just mention, somebody said he never threw anything out of his lab. Actually, that wasn't true. He'd get these enormous stacks of journals and he'd read through them and throw them away. They were circulating. There was an ongoing process. He read an enormous amount. And he gave us advice for how to read papers. I learned some interesting things. The first bit of advice was, who wrote it, right? And whenever you said, oh, I read something interesting, he said, forget about what you read, who wrote it? And if it was the wrong author, you'd be like, yeah, I don't really care. I don't need to hear it. It's worthless. And if it was somebody good, then he'd be like, okay, tell me about it. And then the next bit of advice he had for reading papers was, well, look at the pictures. I was like, you mean I went to my PhD and all this stuff, and now you're telling me I need to look at the pictures? But that was what he said. That's where the data is presented in modern papers. that's how you can look at things and assess them quickly. Look at the pictures in the journals. I thought that was kind of interesting. Another thing I thought was interesting was I went to visit him in a hospital a couple of months ago, and he was saying that he didn't really get to interact with scientists much. And I said, well, I hear you talking to Ruji. And he's like, why do I want to talk to Ruji? He only knows what I know. Which of course at the time was completely false because Ned had stopped reading articles, and so Ruji was learning a lot of new stuff. But it was interesting to me, it was telling. I think a lot of the people in the DNA field all want to talk to Ned to learn about DNA, and Ned didn't want to talk to any of us really. He wanted to talk to the people who are studying other things. And that was where he got his inspiration from, the artists, from the Islamic art and whatever else that he was interested in. The last people he wanted to talk to were DNA nanotechnology people, turns out. It was interesting to me. I also wanted to say that in addition to defending his students very passionately and writing great recommendation letters, he organized the lab very well. I came in with a PhD in physics into a chemistry lab, and he had a great training system worked out where he would get his students, everybody would come in, they'd reproduce early work from his lab, everything ran smooth as silk. He'd assign someone to train the next student. And I think that's a big part of it. Like we always think of him, oh, he was a great scientist. He was a great lab runner. He really helped people learn. Everybody did AB star, everyone did JY21, whatever else they did. And that really helped all of his students get sort of learning the standard procedures, have a common culture within the lab. And he really helped build that in incredible ways that I think really contributed to the general output of the lab. Finally, I just wanted to point out that they had something they called Ned Fest, I guess, at Foundations of Nanotechnology conference 10, 15 years ago now or something. And all sorts of scientists were getting up saying amazing things about Ned. And Ned kept commenting, I feel like I should be in a box already before all these people are saying all these wonderful things about me. And I just, it's good to know that he knew how much he was loved. And in his lifetime, he was really loved and appreciated. And of course, we continue to love him and appreciate him now. So thanks for your time, and so long, Ned.
Thank you, Bill. There's a ton of people online, so we're going to switch to the Zoom speakers. Zoom speakers, please keep it to 2 minutes. We don't have any way to notify you or harass you, so we're going to institute a new rule. At 3 minutes, we're going to mute you. Okay, and I'm sorry about that, but we just want to let as many people speak as possible. So, and we'll be starting the Zoom sharing now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zhiyong, and I am one of the recipients that had a lifelong support from Ned. He supported us so much everything. I remember we had an accident when I left the lab in California. He sent flowers to the hospital and then found me a lawyer for me. You cannot imagine Ned would do things like that. When I come back to the small town in China, he and Barbara visited me. And even though at that time his back hurts, and then he would do everything to support. I remember the last few months when I left, before I left the Ned's lab, he would write a reference letter for us. When I was asking, when I applied for some other positions, he would, in a couple of minutes, come up with a list of what works he contributed or publications he did, and then come up with reference letters. I once looked at one of the letters he stored, as Hall said, that was like several pages. One of the letter was like 7 pages. I was shocked. He was so strict to every one of us. He transformed us. One thing I remember my lifelong impact is that don't say something that you didn't fully understand. You always let the data to speak, not your speculations. All the things I cannot believe. And I really enjoyed the time when we walked from Waverly to Chinatown for birthday parties. So that was the time that he was in a good mood, and I had a chance to talk and chat with him. And then my positions everywhere at Massachusetts or California or New Jersey, everywhere he was my reference. He was always ready and helped me so much. There was once at one company, the guy hired me immediately, and I come to his office and I joined, and he said, I said, why you made such a quick decision? He said, I was yelled by one of your reference, your advisor. He yelled at me or said, I said, well, what kind of thing he yelled at you? He said, my students can do whatever he is interested. He can do whatever things he wants to do, let alone your bullshit. He was totally using a lot of words that yelled, and then he just supported me everywhere. And one time I was talking to him.
I'm so sorry. We love you, man. But we have to please ask the next Zoom speaker to start.
Hello, is this how it works? I just start to talk. Yeah, as a PhD student, we spent 5-6 years in Ned's lab. We got trained, and then we benefit from being his student for a lifetime. For a span of a couple of decades, Ned was my ultimate benefactor, not only for me, but also for my family. I remember in 1993 or 94, I asked Ned to be his student. Then I went to his office. He quizzed me. Do you know how to synthesize the DNA on the solid phase? I said, I can give a try. So he had a big blackboard. I draw some structures on the board, and I think I nailed it because I just learned 2 days ago from the biochemistry textbook. And then I was given a seat immediately, and I was so happy. Then I went home. Next day, when I arrived to my desk, there was a note for me from Ned. Okay, wow, what kind of handwriting? I couldn't make a single word out of it. So I asked some senior member in the lab. She said, don't be panic. It's 10 o'clock now. Ned doesn't come in until noon. So I had 2 hours to figure out what Ned's notes said. It's eventually, for 2 hours, I figured out. Xiaoping, you made 2 mistakes when you enter 30 nucleotide sequence on the machine. And this is for the first time I said, okay, nanotechnology, DNA nanotechnology, you need to have a precise sequence. So I made 2 mismatches already in this lab. And then I said, okay, I will do better. Then he didn't kick me out. So from that day on, whenever I punch in sequences on that machine, I asked my wife, who is a graduate student as well, downstairs in different lab, to double check with me. And then fast forward 2 decades later, when my wife needed a reference for a very excited opportunity in a big company for legal counsel, we did a letter from someone asking.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to make so many enemies, but we love that story. Please, next Zoom speaker.
Hi, I'm Dick Shirty. I worked with Ned back in the early days in Albany when he could tell you to the exact minute how long he had lived there. And I think the pub that people are talking about is Sutter's Mill, which was across the way from the campus there. So I learned how to be a scientist in his lab. I was a struggling assistant professor at the time. But the one thing I remember, he would be talking about somebody who had, no hemorrhoids, a perfect asshole. Thank you. This has been a great, emotionally tough morning for me. I appreciate everything everybody has said. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I was an undergraduate researcher in Ned's lab from 2012 until 2015. I first joined Ned's lab the summer after my freshman year. Ned saw me working in the lab and he asked me, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Michael. I'm a rising sophomore." And he said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "It means I'm going to be a sophomore in the fall." And he said, "So why didn't you just say that?" The typical Ned comment. Ned's lab was my introduction to scientific research, and it holds a special place in my life and my heart because I actually met my wife in his lab, who was also an undergraduate researcher at the time. We are both now scientists at Yale, and Ned has been supportive of our careers ever since our days as undergraduates in his lab. And we really appreciate this memorial. It's been really special.
Yeah, thank you. And Ned really always made me feel seen as a scientist, and I'll forever be thankful for that.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank all of the speakers warmly as I walk up to the other microphone. I wish we could keep going. There are so many people who are here and who are online that I would love to hear a comment from. And I apologize for all of you that we didn't invite to speak, and especially to those of you that we cut off. But this is a way you make enemies in the academic world. And some of the speakers are like National Academy members and things like that. But anyway, I want to invite Barbara to come up and share a couple of words.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm going to be really short because we want to finish this. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming and for caring. And I'm just really moved by how many lives Ned has touched. And I love the stories, many of which I had never heard before. So that was just great. I just want to quickly thank some people, Ned's caregivers and those who visited him in the hospital meant just so much during that time. The Judson team, Melissa and Zach, I mean, you've just been amazing, and I'm so glad that we're able to be here at this amazing place at Judson, including Zach, the tech team. Oh my goodness, Gil and Sophia, like without you, none of this would be able to happen. So, and like totally amazing. Also the team who helped put all this together, Tosan, Simon, Brandon, Yoel, Ruji, and of course, Julie and Jim. I have no words to express how I feel about that, but you know what I want. But I especially wanted to thank Yoel and Ruji, that they have been there in every way for Ned and for me. I mean, they are his true family. And as I always say about Ruji, that I always call Ruji Ned's real wife. So, you know, and Ruji knows that. And of course, my sister Liz and my brother Donald, who's been with me every step of the way doing all this. So just thank you all for everything. He would have so much loved this, and it's just what he would have wanted. So, so thank you again for everything.
Just to belabor the point, one more thank you to Barbara, not only for being the organizer of this event and convener, but many of you can imagine that Ned, he was not a very good patient. And somehow Barbara just kept loving on him during a time when he really needed somebody to do that. And it wasn't very easy, and it was a little bit more extended than we've talked about. And so I just want to say, Barbara, thank you for taking care of our friend. So. And last but not least, I want to invite Julie to come back again to remind us what she told us before, because I can't remember what we're supposed to do.
Thank you. Don't feel bad. I barely remember myself. I'm so moved hearing everybody's words, and they're not really surprising. I mean, everybody who loved Ned knows that everyone else loved Ned, and but it's just so good to be together in the room and in the Zoom room. Anyway, I just wanted to say, I said before briefly, I was trying to be super quick, and I actually wasn't sure I was going to get another chance to be up here, that Ned specifically requested that we have food that he liked. And somebody earlier mentioned he liked good restaurants, not fancy ones. But there isn't a lot of food Ned didn't like. He just didn't like Nouvelle cuisine, big plate, small food. But anyway, we have a couple of items that we think are some of Ned's favorites. Bagel, sesame bagel with a tiny bit of cream cheese and a huge amount of lox was Ned's personal favorite. But we have just an assortment for you. And they're all mini bagels in a little bag with a chocolate chip cookie, which Ned was not supposed to have, but he liked. And then, of course, it wouldn't be complete without something Chinese. And so we have dumplings, which are pandemic friendly and easy to carry. And there's veggie ones and pork ones and chicken ones and some sesame pancakes. But hopefully you'll find something, and it's all packaged to go for anyone who wants to stay super COVID safe and for anyone who would rather eat than be COVID safe. We ask that you grab something. There's some coffee, tea, cold water, and come back into this area of the church. Melissa calls it the wooden floor area, but that makes it sound like we don't want you to make a mess on the rug. And what it really means is this is where the air circulation is and where the chairs are. So just grab something if you want to stay and come back. You can move the chairs around, make a circle, sit wherever you like. But just that the back area that you can see the balcony hangs over and it's just a little bit more of a cramped space. So one other thing is, again, I just want to remind you to sign the guest book. I think it means so much, and don't worry about smushing into a little space. I see like 20,000 people signed one page. So, you know, take as much space as you want. And along those lines, a lot of people have been sending me their remembrances for our memorial page. That's on the NYU Department of Chemistry website. And they're so beautiful and they're so funny and they're so irreverent and they're so moving. And keep sending them. And you're welcome to send photos as well that you have that you want to share. And I hope that that page will stay alive and that people will refer to it and take comfort in it and laugh a lot for the days to come. So thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity.
Hello, everyone. This is the moderator from Judson Memorial. Feel free to unmute yourselves and speak. We're going to have the chat open for maybe another 15, 20 minutes, and then we will end the Zoom call. Thank you all so much for coming. Take care.
Mountain, there I made my stand. When up on the mountain, there I made my stand. Rifle on my shoulder and a dagger in my hand. Poor boy, I've been all around this world. Hang me, oh, hang me, and I'll be dead and gone. Hang me, oh, hang me, and I'll be dead and gone. Wouldn't mind the hanging, but the laying in the grave so long. Poor boy, I've been all around this world. Put the rope around my neck, hung me up so high. Put the rope around my neck, hung me up so high. Last words I heard him say, won't be long now for you die. Poor boy, I've been all around this world. Hang me, oh, hang me, and I'll be dead and gone. Hang me, oh, hang me, I'll be dead and gone. Wouldn't mind the hanging, but the laying in the grave so long. Poor boy, I've been all around this world.
There's no place in this world where I'll belong when I'm gone. And I won't know the right from the wrong when I'm gone. And you won't find me singing on this song when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't feel the flowing of the time when I'm gone. All the pleasures of love will not be mine when I'm gone. My pen won't pour a lyric line when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't breathe the bracing air when I'm gone. And I can't even worry about my cares when I'm gone. Won't be asked to do my share when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be running from the rain when I'm gone. And I can't even suffer from the pain when I'm gone. Can't say who's to praise and who's to blame when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. Won't see the golden of the sun when I'm gone. And the evenings and the mornings will be one when I'm gone. Can't be singing louder than the guns while I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. All my days won't be dances of delight when I'm gone. And the sands will be shifting from my side when I'm gone. Can't add my name into the fight while I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be laughing at the lies when I'm gone. And I can't question how or when or why when I'm gone. Can't live proud enough to die when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. There's no place in this world where I'll belong when I'm gone. And I won't know the right from the wrong when I'm gone. And you won't find me singing on this song when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it. I guess I'll have to do it. Guess I'll have to do it while I'm here.
I've sung this song, but I'll sing it again, of the place that I lived on the wild windy plain. In the month of April, the county called Grey, here's what all of the people there say. So long, been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. This dusty old dust is a-getting my home, and I got to be drifting along. Well, the dust storm came, it came like thunder, dusted us over, it covered us under, blocked out the traffic, it blocked out the sun, and straight for home all the people did run, singing so long, it's been good to know you, so long, it's been good to know you, so long, it's been good to know you, this dusty old dust is a-getting my home, and I got to be drifting along. hearts they sat in the dark and they sparked. They hugged and they kissed in that dusty old ark. Sighed, they cried, they hugged and they kissed. But instead of marriage, they were talking like this. Honey, so long, been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. This dusty old dust is getting my home. And I got to be drifting along. Now the telephone rang and it jumped off the wall. That was the preacher, he's making his call. He said, kind friends, this may be the end. You got your last chance at salvation of sin. Well, the churches were jammed, the churches were packed. That dusty old dust storm, it blew so black. The preacher could not read a word of his text. He folded his specs, took up collection, said, so long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. This dusty old dust is getting my home. And I got to be drifting along. Now it's so long, been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. The dusty old dust is getting my home. And I got to be drifting along.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who will take they must give, and then the vanity of nations. We look one earth on which to live. Some brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in song.
was a friend of mine. He was a friend of mine. Never had no money, pay for his fine. He was a friend of mine. He died on the road. He died on the road. Never had no money, pay for his bone. He was a friend of mine. He never done no wrong. He never done no wrong. He was just a poor boy a long way from home. He was a friend of mine. I stole away and cried. I stole away and cried. Never had no money, and I can't be satisfied. He was a friend of mine. He was a friend of mine. He was a friend of mine. When I hear his name, you know I just can't keep from crying. He was a friend of mine.
Oh, I marched to the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the early British wars. The young land started growing, the young blood started flowing, but I ain't a marching anymore. For I killed my share of Injuns in 1,000 different fights. I was there at the Little Big Horn. I heard many men a-lying, I saw many more a-dying, but I ain't a marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? For I stole California from the Mexican land, fought in the bloody Civil War. Yes, I even killed my brothers and so many others, but I ain't a marching anymore. For I marched to the battles of the German trench in a war that was bound to end all wars. Oh, I must have killed 1,000,000 men, and now they want me back again, but I ain't a marching anymore. It's always the old to us to the wars, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? For I flew the final mission in the Japanese skies, set off the mighty mushroom roar. When I saw the cities burning, I knew that I was learning that I ain't marching anymore. Now the labor leaders screaming when they close a missile plant. United Fruit screams at the Cuban shore. Call it peace or call it treason, call it love or call it reason, but I ain't marching anymore. No, I ain't marching anymore.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved.
The Union is behind us.
We shall not be moved.
The Union is behind us.
We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved.
We will stand and fight together.
We shall not be moved.
We will stand and fight together.
We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved.
We are black and white together.
We shall not be moved.
We are black and white together.
We shall not be moved, just like a